Buckle up, guys, it's about to get a little bit woo-woo because I don't normally speak really in depth about a lot of the information. I mean, some of it I do, but not the majority of it. I don't speak a lot of in-depth information around what I receive in regards to insights and information that's channeled through me. Generally, I talk about my sort of psychic readings that I do and mediumship readings, but this is like a little bit of a more in-depth personal experience that has been going on for a handful of months now, and ultimately it's led me to some more collective insights that I wanted to bring awareness around. And this is ultimately just information I've received, and at the end of the day it's just theory, it's not fact, it's just information that's been brought through me, and I wanted to share it with you. And it really speaks on something that I actually mentioned a few days back on my socials, which is AI, and is it having an impact on water's consciousness? And I had a little bit of interaction in terms of people's feedback and their perception of it on it, which is amazing, because it is all relevant to what I wanted to speak about today. And so I'm going to take you back in time a little bit as to how this information started to come through me. So again, like I said, this is going to get a little bit woo-woo because this is another aspect of my business and my work that I don't talk about, but I really feel that now's the time to start bringing it through. So a couple of months, if not actually, I want to say about 12 months or so ago, I started to have a lot of dream experiences coming through, and these dream experiences felt very, very vivid, very lucid, and really ultimately made me feel like they were connected to possible past life. I want to call it past life. You can also call it alternate life, because there is the awareness that we're not experiencing time in a linear fashion. It's all happening consecutively, one alongside the other. But I was having what could only be described as almost memories of myself in a different space and time. And if I paint the picture for you, I could visualize myself in almost like a cavern setting underground. Many could describe it as inner earth, possibly. And the only way I could describe it is, you know, these aquariums that we all go to as children, or you can even visit them as adults, where you go through a tunnel and the water almost encapsulates you as you move through the tunnel, and you can see all the sea life around you. And it was very much like this, but it was a real sort of inner earth structure. It wasn't an aquarium, and it felt very much like it was in a time, as I said, like, you know, connected to what could be perceived as past. And they just felt like these ancient structures, and I was surrounded by water. I was myself, but I wasn't myself, if that makes sense. And I recalled that in this experience I was toning, singing into the water, and through that I could see visuals of codes that were being received into the water. These are things that I've actually gone on to channel, and you know, for anybody who has heard of the term light codes, you'll know what I'm talking about. For anybody who hasn't heard of light codes, you know, it's a really, really fascinating subject and really worth looking down. These are some that I've actually recently channeled for myself, so there's a little bit of an idea of what they can actually look like. And these are, you know, I'm going to talk about that in a future video, I think, about why I've been sort of receiving those codes and what I can be and will be using them for. But my awareness through this dream space was that this is something that I did in this lifetime. And through that space, over the months to sort of come, I received more and more information, very, very similar to this, through, you know, for example, clients' healing space. So I might be, you know, sending energy healing to a client, whether that be Rahani, whether that be golden angelic ray healing, whatever the case may be. But I would be almost transported into a space where they were suspended in water, and that through that process they were being where they were being suspended by water, they would be receiving codes that would be absorbed into their energy field. And I started to sort of question, I wonder, if this is where the power of something like holy water, for example, comes from, or like even baptism. That's just my perception. It's not truth. It's just my consideration and curiosity around what was happening. And over time, obviously, water has become not the sort of basis of my practice, is not at all, but it's a curiosity of mine. And I've really been fascinated by the work of people such as Masaru Emoto and Veda Austin, who have done some incredible studies on water. Masaru Emoto was considered one of the first individuals to look down that route, and how he sort of came into awareness was that water could be considered conscious, and it would react in the manner it would react to how we would communicate with it, whether that be positively or negatively. And he's done sort of many studies, how different types of music impact the way that water becomes constructed. The way we speak to water. They've done studies in sort of school environments where they've put a couple of jars of rice, for example, and they've told the students, speak words of love to this jar and speak words of hate to this jar. And over a period of time, we've seen that the jar that they would speak words of hate to has become, the rice has become poisonous and toxic. And the jar in which the rice has had words of love and positivity and compassion spoken to it, even after a period of time in which you would think the rice would normally go mouldy in many environments, it's actually fermented and actually become really beneficial. And I guess, for things like the gut health or anything like that. And he's done many studies, down this route of how water is impacted by our consciousness. Almost, begging the question, is water conscious itself? And then when we look at the work of Veda Austin, and she's kind of expanded on that a little bit more, she's fascinating when you look into her work. And the reason why I wanted to bring this consideration around the light codes into the process is, if you look into her work, there is a lot of studies that she's done where water has been semi-frozen in a Petri dish, and a lot of the imagery that she's taken as a result of the water in that semi-frozen process, they look very similar to light codes. Now, light codes don't just look like the ones that I've just shown you, which the ones that I've sort of channeled, downloaded, but they can look like many different, some are incredibly elaborate. But she's even done studies to the degree that she has placed a Petri dish next to her bedside table at night before she goes to sleep, and she asks to sort of receive something in her dream space, and she'll wake up, freeze the water, go through the process of looking at it through a microscope, and it's actually incorporated within that frozen structure. The imagery of what she's dreamt of, she's managed to capture sort of communication with loved ones in spirit through that structure as well, and it's absolutely fascinating. So what this really sort of has been bringing to my awareness is, and really what I want to speak on in more depth, is actually not only is that we've got that tangible evidence that the way that we communicate and the way that we speak to water, whatever the case may be, whether it's food, there is, I don't want to say scientific, but there is physical, tangible proof from these studies that the way that we vibrate and communicate with these different mediums has a physical impact. And then when we look at ourselves and consider ourselves, as a vast majority of water running through our system, and specifically when you consider it sort of moving through the fascia, which I've talked about on many other occasions, but you've got to look at that and say, well, the way that we communicate with ourselves, the cells within our body, the way that we speak to ourselves, even think about ourselves, we are communicating through those codes. And the way that I've been shown it, and I know I've spoken about this in other videos, is I liken it to, let's look at it from a different angle. So many people consider this a matrix that we live within. And then, so if we look at it from that perspective and we consider it a computer program, computer programs are coded. And when we look at the codes within a computer program, you could look at them and they could look for something very similar to this, for example. And so if we can place a program within a computer and tell it what to do as a result of that coding, could that not be considered? Now, this again, like I said, it's just, for entertainment purposes, and it's just a theory of mine. Could that not be considered what we are communicating within the physical structure in our being with the codes that we communicate through the words that we speak? Like I said, I'll talk a little bit more in turn about what these do, but these have been channeled for me to use for myself, for recoding like false belief systems within my state of awareness, and I've been guided by my guides to place them under a glass of water, for example, to let that water that I'm drinking absorb these codes. Now, as I said, it'd be really interesting actually to do some of Ada's studies with the Petri dish and see if actually the codes that are placed on there do actually get received into that water when it's in that semi-frozen process, and we can actually confirm that when through studying under a microscope. And so if we consider this is an environment that we live within that could be considered a matrix, a computer program, and if we can even consider ourselves that we could be a computer program, we are filtering our brain. Our brain could be that sort of interface for the program that we're running within our physical body. And so the point that I really wanted to lean into is looking at what's happening with AI at the moment. Okay, there's a lot of information out there about AI. I don't tend to sort of educate myself on too much so that the information that I receive isn't too sort of tarnished by a lot of the opinions and everything out there, but I have enough of a view to sort of understand what's going on. I do certainly know that the wonderful Erin Brockovich, who, if anyone's watched that film from the early 2000s, I've got so much time for her. She's an absolute powerhouse. And we all know that she went against a very, very powerful conglomerate at the time. And apparently she is now going ahead and a head-to-head with a lot of the AI data centers and the people that are building the data centers. And so what I really wanted to talk about was that, because, and it sounds like a bit backwards that I'd be talking about something very, very spiritual and then talking about AI data centers. But when we look at AI data centers, now one, there's been a lot of information that they're just popping up out of nowhere. They're just turning up in and the size of them is absolutely extortionate. But they are showing up in the middle of nowhere, overnight pretty much. And the people in the sort of location surrounding them, they have no awareness, no prior awareness, and they're not getting any say-so, which is very much why I think Erin Brockovich is getting involved, because there's been a number of different things that has been highlighted around what can impact the health and well-being of people in the environments of those data centers. But my point that I'm really wanting to feed into is, in order for these data centers to be able to run, considering the amount of computer equipment in there, they need to utilize millions of gallons. I think it's something ridiculous. I don't even know the actual figures, in fact, some figures behind it, but it's millions of gallons of water on a daily basis to cool the systems to run the data centers. Now, one, I think a lot of people are panicking because some of the environments that they're in, they don't even have the water available. So what's going to happen to the people in the surrounding areas? But my point is now, when we look at AI, artificial intelligence, okay, we can also consider that a term of coding, a form of coding, a form of programming for the environment around them. When the water is cooled, it just doesn't disappear into nothingness. It is called and it will disperse into some sort of vapor. That vapor is then going to be received into the environment around it. That information is then going to be released into that field. Okay, so we, even if we're not using AI, could we then be considered to be susceptible for accessing the programming that is being lent into the environment around it? Very similar to what I was seeing in this sort of visual of this dream space setting. You know, if the environment around us is really a matrix, a computer program, and we're coding it through the, you know, light codes, through the words that we speak, through the actions that we take, through the vibration that we ultimately exist within, then even if we're not utilizing AI, could that be having an impact on the environment around us? It sounds very fear-mongering. You know, could it then be creating the reality around us through this artificial intelligence that is being dispersed into the atmosphere, received into the atmosphere? If these codes create reality and artificial intelligence is dispersing that into the environment around us, could that then be creating the reality around us? That you could say it's not of our free will nature, but unless we our free will can literally be us feigning ignorance and not taking any action to make a change around it. So this is what I want to lean into, because it does sound very fear-mongering, like, you know, oh my goodness, we're not going to have any control over, you know, AI taking over and altering our reality or the world that we live within. However, the other aspect of what I want to lean into is CERN. So CERN, the Large Hadron Collider, I don't know too much about it. It's located in Switzerland, I think. But its purpose apparently is scientific. It's used to launch particles against each other to sort of form some sort of scientific experimentation around. Now, again, like I said, I don't know too much about it, and I'm actually not going to go into depth around what CERN is. However, it has been curiously questioned around whether it has an impact on timelines because of the experimentation that they're doing now when it comes to, you know, really like working with this particle experimentation that they're doing there. A lot of people have questioned whether it's caused Mandela effects in the past. Now, at the moment, we have a 4-year window. We've got a 4-year window where CERN is actually switched off. And a lot of people have said, oh, well, it's for maintenance, and that surely could be the case. Apparently wants to ramp things up a little bit and upgrade their systems to actually be in alignment with AI, which is very interesting. But the way I look at it is, and certainly a lot of people have been talking about this, that since CERN has been switched off, that things feel different. I've definitely slept better. I've noticed things about the atmosphere feeling a little bit more nostalgic, so to speak. You know, birds seem to be singing, the environment feels more natural again. And one thing I've definitely noticed is that there's less interference when it comes to, so a lot of us who work with like channeling information, psychic work, mediumship work, we work obviously on frequencies and vibrations, and we tune into those different frequencies to tap into the information coming through. And for a period of time, I did notice what felt like a little bit of interference, like I couldn't get a very clear quality around the information coming through, not on a psychic level, not on a mediumship level, but certainly on more like in advanced information coming through, so it's more collective, like a collective space. And what I've noticed is that doesn't seem to be happening now. Like the signals are a lot clearer, like the information is coming through, for example, what I'm talking about today. Now, my perception is, if CERN is closed off for 4 years, then it's not going to have an interference with the different timelines. It's not going to be having an impact on the Mandela effect or anything like that. So it's offering a window of opportunity, a period of time where we can take matters into our own hands. So even if AI, is advancing at the rate of knots, so to speak, as it appears to be, we can still have that opportunity to take matters into our own hands through. We have to recognize that we've been so diminished over the years, so minimized over the years, to be just little ants running around on a rock. Like, we're incapable, that we have no capabilities, no power, no purpose in this world. And ultimately, you've got to question, well, why would we be here, for a start? And so the way I look at it is, this is an opportunity for us to understand that each and every single one of us has that capacity to speak within their own environment, the matrix environment, the world around us, the codes of what they are wanting. Like I said, it's all entertainment purposes. This is all just my theory, but this is just information. And so we all have that opportunity to sort of speak into our environment. You can look at it and say, this is kind of what like manifestation is. People talk about how they'll do things like scripting. They'll script their future into their experience. And I just look at that as no different than, if we were coding the environment around us. And like I said, we've got a lot of different physical, tangible confirmations of this from people like Masaru Emoto, like Veda Austin, that are kind of proving a point in that the words that we speak, the toning that we offer into the environment, has a physical impact on the structure of the world around us. It's been documented for many, many years now. And so it would be really interesting to see how, through us doing so on an individual basis, how collectively that would impact things. As I said, the codes that I've been receiving, these are being channeled purposely for me. They are my own individual codes. They are not for use by anybody else other than myself, but they're for me to sort of be receiving into my field, so that my field can start to be coded differently. Say I've got a lot of false belief systems in my physical environment, and these codes can help restructure that within my physical state of being, through the waters that run through my body, through the vapor that I disperse when I speak. It's a really interesting concept, and it'd be really interesting to see if there's other people who maybe have had like quite similar information coming through. But it's just something I felt like I wanted to share a little bit more, like I said, because it's a little bit more woo and a little bit more of me and what I get up to behind the scenes when I'm doing my work. And it's just fascinating, and I just love to know your thoughts on it, guys. Anyway, take care, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.